Bitcoin seems to have become digital gold, very successful digital gold. You mentioned Bitcoin passing gold. I think that will happen at some point.
Yeah.
Do you still think that Bitcoin will become kind of a digital currency that's used every day to buy goods and services? And do you think that it must become that in order to be successful?
No, I mean, I think, that you can certainly see in some players that they are more focused on the gold. And I think Bitcoin can become vastly successful even just as a, a kind of ETF or savings or
The store value.
technology. Yeah. But I think that misses some of the potential because some of the value is driven by the peer-to-peer electronic cash. And I think, if you look globally, the proportion of the working population that is informal economy, it's about 50% of the global workforce, right? And so for many of those people who don't have banking relationships or maybe only via their employer or an upstream reseller, it gives them global access to the markets. And so I think that is actually, has a very large target audience, and there's lots of scope for adoption. And, open permissionless networks tend to innovate faster as well. It's kind of a lesson from the internet, right? That's why the internet became such a huge thing and innovated so quickly, where previously, typically state-controlled telecoms monopolies were really slow in terms of innovation.
What are you most worried about, or what do you think the biggest risks for Bitcoin are right now?
I think most of the risks have receded. I mean, certainly in the early days, we were, at Blockstream, and many individuals involved, either as developers or investors, were concerned that, a government would ban Bitcoin. And I think that the transition has actually been quite smooth. Of course, some countries ban Bitcoin, but, those same countries ban Facebook and Twitter and so on, right? So it's sort of par for the course. And, I think, as Safedine says, it's not really optional. The people, the individuals, the countries, the companies with the harder money will win, and their capital will get reallocated. So, everybody will ultimately have to participate.
When you see the president or others in politics talking about Bitcoin the way that they do you feel validated? Do you feel like we've won? Or are there other things that you feel like are milestones that Bitcoiners can't yet, celebrate and say, we were right?
Well, I guess we were very right so far, right? Let's say that. And
Directionally going pretty well.
yeah, and I think, actually it's okay if, governments don't adopt too quickly, or not at all even, because it gives more time for individuals to buy Bitcoin. And I think, part of what helps in the world is the thinking that comes with self-sovereignty. And, even though Bitcoin's a piece of sort of neutral technology, ultimately it seems to prove to not be neutral. Like, people get interested in it for a number of different reasons, because they've got an electronic cash need, or because they made an investment, and they get philosophically interested and start to change the way they interact economically with the world. So I think, it's actually good in a way if people have, some more years opportunity to buy, but I'm kind of feeling that it could be gradually then suddenly moment this cycle, or pretty soon, but we'll see how this cycle plays out, right? Whether diminishing returns is broken or not, whether we see a kind of extracting value from gold via ETFs at the margin phenomena coming in later in the bull cycle. So
When you look at the market today, it feels like there are what I'll call Bitcoin companies, which are focused on, layer one, what Bitcoin originally was. There's been a rise of L2s, side chains, and many other components. Some of it is focused on scaling. Some of it is focused on bringing the R&D that's happening in altcoins over to the Bitcoin market. What's kind of your evaluation of, these things being built beside or on top of Bitcoin, and everything from the Lightning Network, Liquid, these NFTs, etc.?
yeah, I mean, I think it turns out that blockchains don't scale very well. And so layer twos are sort of inevitable to at least be able to manage the retail payments and the trading and like share transfer and share settlement kind of use cases. Now, one thing which is not ideal, but technology is what it is, right? And everybody's trying to push the envelope on this, is that you get the best security assurances by holding your own UTXO, and UTXOs are hard to scale. And, layer 2 UTXOs are not as hard assurance as layer 1. So really, in an ideal world, everybody who wants one should be able to get a layer 2 UTXO, but we don't really know how to do that, right? So I think that's something that is in the mind of technologists is, if the active user base goes from 100 million to 1 billion people in the next few years, not really ready for it. So, it always spills off into something else, right? So they end up using custodial, some of them buy ETFs, some of them store it in layer 2 or, partly store in layer 2. I've seen it phenomena emerge where people will kind of do their dollar cost averaging into Lightning and then fold some of it into Liquid. And then when they've built up to a bigger amount, they'll store it on the main chain. So, I think the economic forces keep people using what scalability there is in the different technologies in a sort of natural, economically rational balance. And that's the best we can do, to sort of adapt and use technology that proves to work in the market.
Mm-hmm. When you look at the entire Bitcoin ecosystem, it feels like it's probably the biggest melting pot on Earth. You have people who come from different countries, different languages, religions, wealth, education, everything. And they're all united by this kind of common ethos or value of Bitcoin. Now that the Wall Street political, kind of world, et cetera, is all embracing Bitcoin, does that mean that the ethos and values have really kind of assumed a position of importance? I used to say all the time that we'll have a Bitcoin president. They're not going to run on a Bitcoin platform. They'll just own Bitcoin, like they own stocks or whatever, and they'll be the president. I was wrong. The current US president literally ran his summer, protect your Bitcoin. I'm going to be the Bitcoin president.
Right.
And so I don't know if he in particular is a hardcore Bitcoiner and could espouse the different values and ethos that maybe somebody on, X would. But it does feel like if you look around the world, whether it's Bukele in El Salvador or, Milei in Argentina or, name other examples, it does feel like the values are kind of permeating into these organizations as Bitcoin rises in popularity as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating, but it does, because if you come down to it, it's a kind of inert protocol that was launched in 2009, but the values that arise from it are sort of social phenomena. And I think at root, it is that, hard money works and incentives matter. And so, being able to rely on hard money affects a lot of things about how you think about the world economically and how you interact with it. So it turns out that phenomena scales upwards so far without limit, right? In the sense that, first of all, it's enthusiasts, the first wave, and then, ETF buyers, and now institutional, and looks like more governments. I mean, already several governments involved, right? And, I think in Trump's particular case, getting debanked kind of gave him a reason to understand why people would want self-sovereign store of value, right? So I think, once you've learned that lesson the hard way, you're not going to forget it in a hurry. So I think that brings a lot of sympathy. And Bukele actually, originally when that story came on the scene, people's assumption was, somebody did some business development with them, but actually no, it seems like it's homegrown, and Bukele himself, was the Bitcoiner or the patient zero for El Salvador, which is pretty cool.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is probably the last thing you would have expected is that the actual president was the one who came up with the idea.
Right. And that's, that and other, well-executed policy changes and actions from the government actually really transformed that whole country in terms of,
Do you think that they're the next, superpower, or how do you think this plays out as Bitcoin becomes?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty interesting to look at countries undergoing a rapid transformation, starting from a point of, having a problem. And so you can see that with Singapore, didn't really have a lot of natural resources. They managed to turn that into a global financial player. Maybe Dubai, they didn't have any oil, turned into a real estate boom, attracting a lot of kind of international companies to operate there, became an economic success for the region. I think another country which doesn't necessarily have a lot of natural resources is Switzerland, eventually wealthy and capitalist country, typically at the top of the economic efficiency rankings globally. So it shows that efficient government and the right incentives can work for regions. So let's see. But I think El Salvador is already seeing a dramatic increase in external money coming in, both through tourism and companies incorporating and operating from there, employing people, and the trickle-down economy. So I think it's actually a real effect. So we'll see how that progresses.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Where can we send people to find you on the internet or find out more about Blockstream, some stuff you guys are doing with the institutional world?
Yeah, if you look at blockstream.finance, or just go to the Blockstream website and click around, and at Blockstream on social media, and myself, I'm at Adam3US on Twitter and other social media.
What was the 3US? Where did that come from?
It was originally a pseudonym, and then I kind of changed it, like swapped the letters around so that it was less likely to be name squatted.